Hey there. I just finished reading uh, Ernest Hemingway's The Sun Also Rises, and I'm going to talk about it a little bit. Spoiler alert, I will give away some of the story if you haven't read it, so I'm careless that way. The story takes place in Europe in the years after World War One, consisting of a group of four men and one woman who are group of friends of sort. And what I did was I read or I watched some YouTube analysis of the book. I shouldn't have done that. Note to self: don't read the analysis. Read it first, then give my own analysis, and then if I want to see the analysis after that, because what I'm thinking about this book is contaminated by what I studied. If I can try to divorce myself from that, what I would say is from this story, it's like you're stepping into the action of five people who are just living life. Just ruptured expression. Rupture feels like the right word. They're just continuing with the madness of the war years, the brutality, the what is the word? The impulsiveness of life. Kind of without direction or impulse or direction or consequence. The two main characters in the story are Jake and Brett. Brett is a woman, and there's a love interest between them. Jake has been emasculated in the war. He had an awful injury that left him impotent. Don't know the extent of it, but he basically cannot fulfill, a relationship with Brett. So there's this tension that can never be together, even though it seems that Jake is the man that Brett loves. Brett has relationship after relationship with other men in the story. There's Cone, there's Mike, there's Pedro. I think I've got just about everybody. And Bill, I think is the other guy's name. Anyway, it all starts in Paris, and it's one nonstop bar or restaurant, cafe after another, or hotel room. These people seem to be staying in these luxurious, or maybe not luxurious. They seem to be living a life like a tourist would live, but seemingly with bottomless reserves of cash. When really it's only one person. I think Jake, who even has a job. Many of them strive to be writers, but it doesn't seem like they do a whole lot of writing. One of them, I can't remember which, has some success with his books. Brett, the woman, she's actually Lady Ashley. She's married to a wealthy, I think he's a baronet, but he's nowhere in the picture, and they're on their way towards divorce. So she'll be giving up everything, including the title. So who knows where they're funding all this stuff, but they're just constantly ordering drinks, constantly getting cabs, constantly having meals and staying in hotel rooms and picking up their bags and going off somewhere else. Everything that happens in Paris is a flurry, and I do know that there's a bit of it that occurs on an island in the, how do you say it, the Seine, the river that goes through Paris, just up from Notre Dame. I had to look it up in Google Maps while I was reading it. From Paris, so there's this, from the moment, it's like you drop into the book, you drop into the story, and the action is going, just bam, 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 constant dialogue happening. And I wouldn't call it engaging dialogue. It's not like, there's a couple of passages in there where I actually, had to stop and I had to tell my wife, wow, reading, I got maybe like that far into it before I ran across that first paragraph. I told my wife, reading this book was worth it just to read that paragraph. It was such good writing. There were maybe three pieces in this book that were like that for me, just where the writing really stood out. Otherwise, the writing, I know Hemingway's a famous author. I found his writing to be, is the word, well, I don't know the word. I wasn't too impressed. It's not like Nathaniel Hawthorne that just woos me with his writing, or Herman Melville that just creates, or John Steinbeck's even better, for creating painting pictures of scenery, of landscapes, like in The Grapes of Wrath, how every other chapter paints the scenery, the setting for the dialogue that will come in the succeeding chapter. Um, there's a little bit of that in here. There's one scene where uh, uh, um, what's his name? Jake is in the sea. He's on his own. He's back in Spain. He's got like 2 days alone by the seaside. He's out in the sea, and he describes from this out on a float out in the ocean that he swam out to. Describes the landscape, and I kind of felt a little bit like it. And he describes the feeling of the air, and so Hemingway's got it in him, but I just didn't feel it in this book. So from Paris, the group make their way down in via various circuitous routes down into Spain, crossing the border, etc. And then the two men, is it Jake and, it's not Cohen, it's Jake and, is it Mike or Bill? I can't remember. Wind up in what kind of felt like a little bit of a Brokeback Mountain moment where they go off into the hills to go fishing together, spending a lot of time, really kind of the high point of the book. I mean, these are lost souls, it seems. They can't settle down. They can't stop drinking. They can't stop partying. They can't stop, having sex with one another. And or at least everybody's having sex with Brett. And one of the interesting things is that you can always tell when Brett's been having some liaison because she always needs to take a bath. And Brett takes a lot of baths in this book. So they I think it's Jake and Bill are off into the fishing, and they have a very good time up there. Great time. Catch lots of fish. Good conversation, and you feel the tension drop. And the reason that they're together is that Cohn had been distracted by something. I think Cohn was with them or something. Something happened. It was hard to follow a lot of the action. But Brett and one of the men, I can't remember which one, wound up staying in some town somewhere. And that's why Cohen had to go visit them or kind of retrieve them back. That's what gave Jake and Bill the chance to go into the mountains together. So when they come back down from that, somehow they wind up in La Paloma, I think it is, in Spain, which is actually a place that Ernest Hemingway had visited with his wife to watch the bullfights. And they're there for the bullfights. They're there for the fiesta. And one of them is Jake, who's an aficionado, of the bullfights. He knows the fights. And Brett hasn't seen them. She's a little bit, the men folk are a little bit, reluctant for her to see it because of the violence, particularly with the horses. But Brett wants to do it, and she does go to watch the bullfight. And we learn a lot about the violence of the bullfight, particularly towards the innocent horses. But there's other violence as well. Good writing on the part of Hemingway, describing how Pedro Romero, the bullfighter, would, produce the killing blow with his sword to the bulls that he was battling. But anyway, I just introduced another character. That was the fifth man. I mentioned him from the beginning. Pedro, was it Ramirez? He's a young bullfighter, 19 years old, handsome as the day is long, as the summer day is long. Really good-looking young man. Of course, Brett falls for him. They have an affair. She kind of, wrecks him a little bit. He's an up-and-coming, and Pedro is. He's got his handlers, and his handlers are not happy by the fact that he's spending his time with Brett, or by the fact that Cohen beats the crap out of Pedro. I mean, just totals him before the last day of bullfighting. Cohen was a boxer back in. He had to fight a lot being a Jew. He gets teased a lot, and there's some teasing going on in here, some sentiment that way. But he beats the shit out of. Excuse my language, but he does. I mean, it's my language is not extreme because Pedro keeps coming up and Cohen knocks him down over and over until the next day at the bullfight, Pedro's face is a mess, but he still performs well. I guess he performed well with Brett, but Brett, we don't know exactly how, but she kind of had her way with him and then sent him going in a way. And he was a man that had very little experience with women, having had only been with 2 women before he met Brett. At least that's what Brett reported to Jake. The book kind of, if there's 3 sections there, right? There's 3 big main sections. The time in Paris, in France, the time in Spain, there's the fishing part, and then the La Paloma for the fiesta, which is kind of the the climax, right? I mean, the whole fiesta, 4-day fiesta with the bullfights is kind of this climactic event that ends in the destruction of the bulls and the destruction of Pedro Romero by Brett. Then there's this anticlimactic scene, or actually, I don't know if that's the right term, but this wind down when Brett, so Brett goes away. Oh, she's still with Pedro. She's off with Pedro, destroying Pedro. They're off in Madrid. I keep forgetting his name. Jake, star of the show, winds up alone on a coastal city he goes up into France because he's escorting, I think it's Cone. He's escorting Cone or up somewhere. I get a little confused. Anyway, he winds up back in Spain. Again, endless supplies of money. Do they rent a car with a chauffeur and they're driving all around France and Spain, and God or something knows where they're getting the money from. And I think they have allowances from their families back in America and in England. Like I said, Cohen's got a job as a reporter, although he never seems to work. Anyway, he ends up back. This is, for me, the best part of the book. He ends up back, Jake ends up back at this coastal city, and I can't remember what it is. It's another Spanish city that starts with P, I think. And he winds up back there and has like 2 days to himself. Just taking in the atmosphere, being alone, maybe a little bit of drinking, bathing in the sea, enjoying the sights, just living a little bit. I got the feeling that this was the kind of him trying to settle in. Remember, these are people that have been destroyed from the war years. This is they're part of, as Gertrude Stein described, the lost generation. They've had their futures and their hopes and their potential in their world wiped clean because of the Great War. And I feel like there's some peace there for Jake, until he gets not one but 2 telegrams, 2 wires from Brett in Madrid saying, come, I need you. And in particular, what she says, it's very to the point. She says, Could you come Hotel Montana, Madrid, AM, am rather in trouble, Brett. Could you come Hotel Montana, Madrid, am rather in trouble, Brett. And then a few minutes later, the guy comes, the maitre d', the concierge arrives with another telegram, another sealed telegram. He opens that one and says, could you come Hotel Montana, Madrid, AM, rather in trouble, Brett. So Brett sent it twice, as if once was not enough. And he responds back with a telegram to her, says, Lady Ashley, Hotel Montana, Madrid, arriving, Sud Express tomorrow, love, Jake. Sud Express is like the night train that would be running from this town to Madrid. So he does that, and he makes his way back, and he gets to Madrid, and finds his way up to Brett. And Brett's just, the mess was that she had just dismissed Pedro, and she wanted Jake back. And the story ends with them heading out. Where are they headed to? I kind of forgot. They were headed to, they rode right in a taxi to the Palace Hotel. They left their bags and arranged for berths in the Sud Express. And they sat at the Palace Hotel. They sat on high stools at the bar, while the barman shook the martinis into large nickeled shakers. It's funny what wonderful gentility you have in a bar of a big hotel, I said. Barmen are jockeys and the only people who are polite anymore. No matter how vulgar the hotel is, the bar is always nice. And everything ends then with the bartender shaking out 2 more martinis for them. And they decide that they're going to go to a restaurant called Botin's, and the barman gets the address for them. And it all ends with them heading out downstairs. And here's the final, like I told you, spoilers, right? Here's the final bits. Brett and Jake. They walk out of the bar. They're headed out to the hotel. We're gonna go have dinner. Downstairs, we came out through the first floor dining room to the street. A waiter went for a taxi. It was hot and bright. Up the street was a little square with trees and grass where there were taxis parked. A taxi came up the street. The waiter hanging out at the side. Imagine the waiter driving up, hanging out the side, bringing the taxi back. I tipped him and told the driver where to drive. and got in beside Brett. So this is Jake speaking. The driver started up the street. I settled back. Brett moved close to me. We sat close against each other. I put my arm around her, and she rested against me comfortably. It was very hot and bright, and the houses looked sharply white. We turned out onto Gran Via. Oh, Jake, Brett said, we could have had such a damned good time together. Ahead was a mounted policeman in khaki, directing traffic. He raised his baton. The car slowed suddenly, pressing Brett against me. Yes, I said. Isn't it pretty to think so? So they remain lost. Sorry, I gave the spoiler away to the end, as I warned I would. They remain lost to the end. So even though they love each other, even though through all of this experience of Paris and then La Paloma and this seaside town and then Madrid, they come back last to one another despite all of Brett's ins and outs, so to speak. Jake is back with her. He accepts her, but they know that they cannot be together because of the war that has ruined, literally, Jake, his manhood, so to speak, and ruined Brett and ruined their entire generation. Before I read this book, I had no idea that the World War I generation was called the Lost Generation. I had no idea that I had never thought about the consequences of the war that it would have upon Europe and the people that live there. Now these are, for the most part, English-speaking folks, expatriates in Europe, and the people who are the Europeans are kind of they're what do you call them, extras seemingly in the whole plot, except for Pedro Romero, the bullfighter. Good story. I'm really glad I read this. I got through it in record time too, because I can't say that I was enjoying it. It wasn't a page turner like wow, like reading Hawthorne, right? Well, I read Hawthorne slowly because it's so damn good, and it just brings me to tears, and I go back and I read because I just want to soak it all up. But this was a good book that way. I'm really glad that I've got this under my belt. Highly recommended. Ernest Hemingway's The Sun Also Rises, considered by many his greatest work. It was his second published work after In Our Time. And some others, though, who disagree that it's his greatest, believe that this was the opening act that would later become A Movable Feast, which was published posthumously after his suicide in Idaho in 1961, I think it was. There you go. Great book. Next up, I'm going to reread. I usually don't read a book more than once, but I'm going to reread Billy Budd Sailor by Herman Melville. Again, another one of my favorite authors. I read this in college. I was quite moved by it. I've decided to read it again. So here we go. Up next, Billy Budd Sailor. Thanks for joining me. Let's read.